And yeah, basically there are bathrooms for those that are physically here, they're just around the corner. There's also snack and coffee over there, which is mostly be found, so we're doing good on that. For those in Zoom, you know, I hope you know where your bathroom and your snacks are, so we won't cover that. But the Wi-Fi here locally is Ghost Pines. You might see two of them, either one will work. The password is Jolly Nest 883, and it's written down over there, but all lowercase, we're Jolly, we're Nest, together is 883. Lastly, before I introduce Michael, I wanted to bring up for any of those that are here. We've been working about getting our off-the-map speed testing software that we have that we're doing for the 3 counties that are at least represented here in Zoom and otherwise. That we're trying to get some ground truthing of the speed test, and one of the ways that we've done it here is to try to get the word out. In our Gillette County are these cards that Patty has here across the table has designed that we're going to be handing out every way we can think of. So if you have good ideas, then let us know. But restaurants, in person, wherever we can, county fair, and on the back is the QR code, which I got, you know, copied Jim on that, and use the QR code and has a little bit of language of what we're trying to do, what it's going to help as far as getting more money directly to our county so we can see what we really have and what the real ground truth is, as we like to say, as far as the speeds that we're seeing at our individual houses and businesses versus what might be getting reported by ISPs. No offense to Casey, but you know, they're oftentimes a little bit overstated, to say the least. Not yours, I'm sure not yours. Definitely. But even though this is our select counties, you guys can take a stack with you if you want. And hand them out and see how they do, because if somebody takes their test, it's just going to register in your county. So there's no harm in it. That's just, you know, whether it's here or anywhere else, it's going to work. So with that, I think you all know who I am. I'm Eric. I am the Eric Fiddle. I am the technical director, really only person dedicated to broadband. So whatever title you want to give me. At the Broadband Services Manager Office, which runs within the Pagosa Springs CDC, who's hosting this event. And I discovered pretty much everything broadband related around Orange County and work with a lot of these fine regional folks to try to, you know, work together to get things done regionally as well. And we also work a lot with the Colorado Broadband Office, and one of the, I guess you could say, newer members still. There's been a lot of people. You're probably not the most recent one added, but sometime last year, we got dedicated technical assistance folks for the east and western half of the state. Michael Murphy is dedicated to us. I'm not sure if it works out there, but it's east west. Okay, so we're on the west, obviously. So Michael, he comes to our weekly meetings, and he's getting pretty used to us all. Maybe tired of us by now. I don't know, but we certainly appreciate him, and we appreciate him coming down. He's going to come and he can talk about. For those that haven't seen it, some of the programs that were underway with the state of Colorado and where we're at on all that. I'll let him kind of cover the format, but I think we're going to try to do it fairly interactive. So if there are questions, a lot of us have seen this before, but those that haven't, I mean, you know, feel free to ask questions too. But we're really, a lot of us in this region, trying to get down to kind of brass tacks. We're trying to figure out what exactly you need to do to take advantage of these fundings that we know about, and to work with CBO, work with Michael and others to make sure that our applications are as well crafted and liable to be accepted as possible to bring as many of our households as we can in our areas to the goal of fiber to the home mostly, and but at least the standards of speed and reliability that we're all going for. So with that, I'll turn it over to Michael, and appreciate him coming back.
I'm sorry, what? Can everybody hear me on the Zoom? Okay. Give a thumbs up for everybody. Like I said, I'm with the CBO. This program, this presentation I have, it has digital equity and the CDO programs. You guys have probably already seen every bit of this information in some format or another. So if I'm into a slide that you guys have already seen, we can just pass it. I'll hit enter and we can interact any other way you want. Because it's more about the conversation and what we need to do for this area than it is for me presenting the presentation that I have today.
Got it.
So I'm going to cover digital equity real quick, give you an update on where we're at in the state of Colorado for digital equity. The contact for this is Melanie Coletti. She does a much better job presenting this than I do, but I'm going to try my best at it. But she's double booked. Just one of the things that she always wants to try to do is level set. What is digital literacy? What is digital inclusion? And what is digital equity? And I heard her present this last week, and it rang true to me finally what these mean. Digital equity is the utopia where we want to be, where everyone's equally digitally skilled. Digital literacy is understanding the digital as well as being able to utilize the digital network. And then digital inclusion is having the resources, whether it be the connection or the PC, to be able to connect. So we'll hear digital equity used a lot, and really and truly what we're talking about is digital literacy and digital inclusion. I know I put you in the okay. So the covered populations for the NOFO and the digital equity. These are the covered populations, and you can see there that some of it is centered around the veterans and aging, but then there's also the it's also individuals with disabilities as well as incarcerated individuals. Now, there's a lot of programs going on for the incarcerated individuals, but if you look at the state of Colorado and mapping out the connectivity, not very much connectivity goes to the state correctional facility. So we've got to work on that. And community engagement, this is where they're at right now. They're doing our community outreach. They received their planning grant. So they received about $900,000 to do the planning. And then once they have the plan completed, or targeting November, once they have that plan completed, they will submit that. And then next year, we should get around $21 million for digital equity programs. Now, of course, with BEAD, if we get 100% connectivity plans, we can put some of the BEAD money for digital equity or other programs, but we do have to do that after we have a 100% coverage plan in Colorado. There's going to be some links here later on, and I'll provide this presentation to everybody here. They're asking for you guys to please get engaged with the community engagements that they're reaching out. They'll be happy to set some up here locally as well. They're just gathering data as well. And we know how good all the data is, right, for broadband, whether it be digital equity, anchor institutions, or connectivity where it's at. It's a mess. Still in progress trying to correct it. So they're definitely searching for all the data that they can find on who needs the digital equity, what do they need, and they want it to be at the community level so that it's more geared for the community that it's reaching, not a one size fits all, because they know that's not going to work for them. And that just kind of an idea or not an idea. What they decided to do is create a digital navigator pilot program. And what the hopes of that this digital navigators, they will be across the state and they'll be local to the communities and available to help anyone that has questions. Because as we get into this digital economy, digital world, there's going to be a lot of folks that Used to, they would go to a location and fill out a form by hand. Now they're gonna have an email, sign in and fill it out online. So these digital navigators are gonna be there to help them from how to log onto a computer to fill out a form to getting a computer at their house. Because there's programs that we have that will come available for equipment as well. So these digital navigators, they're thinking that it's going to be based in libraries first, and then other community engagement will drive where else it needs to go. And of course, this is not to be one and done. It's ever evolving, because as we move forward with technologies, there's things that people will need to be trained on or need to upgrade or upskill on. So they're trying to create this as a coalition, and then it takes off and continues to feed itself with the necessary programs and engagements that they need. So it's not we're going to set up digital equity, do it one time for the next 2 or 3 years, 5 years, and then we're done with digital equity. It's going to be ongoing. And this is how you guys can help. If you hit this QR code, this will do a digital equity mapping. It's going to ask you some questions that you can fill out. And they're looking to get this statewide if we can. They're looking for as much information, like I said, they need as much data as they can get on what services are needed, as well as where every individual community or region may be in terms of what services should be targeted for that. And if you have any requests for meetings or presentations here locally to help with digital equity or to engage others, Melanie Coletti, there's her email there. She definitely will, she's open to joining a call from Zoom or even coming down if you guys have a request for that. That's what I had for digital equity. So any questions on digital equity, or is it for, yeah?
Hey, Michael.
Yes.
I'm Jeff Beckman, Southern Butte Tribe. We have, the tribe was given a 5-year grant, digital equity grant from the Colorado Trust, but really interested in what sort of process and tools, because we feel we're building out the Navigator program kind of ourselves. And so I'll to reach out to them.
Yes, I think that would be a good collaboration for the tribes and state of Colorado digital equity group to get together. Because we don't want to recreate the wheel every time. We can learn from each other and help each other be more efficient. That's going to definitely make the money go further. But yes, definitely. Melanie, and I can set you up with Melanie and set up a call if you want to.
Okay, thank you.
Go on, Michael. It's not exactly equity, but I can see maybe how it kind of plays into the accessibility portion, kind of with those cards that we have, and I wondered with the AmeriCorps volunteers, is that something that if they are going to be, working out of the library or locally based at all, is that something that we could get them involved with to say, well, first of all, find out what you've got at your house, if you even have, because that's the one that we really struggle with, is the ones that don't have it at all. And so there's a way to fill out on our, the 3 counties that are participating, there's a way to actually fill out to say, I have no access is one of the things, but it's a form based that almost requires you to go to the library to do it, because they may not have a way to get to the internet to fill out the form. Is that something that we could involve them with and interact with the AmeriCorps, Serve Colorado, what do you call them, digital navigators?
Yes, digital navigators, yes,
Okay.
of course.
Okay.
Absolutely, because they can assist you with that. And, you're right, there's going to be folks that come into these anchor institutions, they don't have internet today, so they cannot give us information via these cute little QR codes and everything else, right?
Right.
So we're going to need to help them out.
And then when does that start, that program?
When did it start?
Or when does it, or is it already?
The pilot's already started up in the northeast or northern part of Colorado,
Okay.
but they're looking to expand the pilot. So if you're interested, we definitely get you in touch with Melanie and see how that can transpire.
Okay. Thank you.
You look like you're about to ask a question, Chad. Come on.
Yeah, has there been any outreach done to the libraries to prepare them for this?
I could not answer that. Melanie would be able to. I believe they've started working with the libraries, but I don't think they've got to every rural library yet.
I'd be happy to just organize a call for our libraries.
You know, we could actually invite Melanie to one of the Friday calls, if you wanted to do that, happen on. So that she could, talk through this program and what they're planning to do. Yes,
I apologize if it's on the slides, but do you know about how many people in our region simply do not have access to the internet? And not due to economic reasons, but due to,
there's so much data out there, I don't know if we can filter it that way or if it's readily available. Other than, you know, what we have on the broadband map, and that's from the FCC, which it's getting more accurate, but it's not as accurate as it could be.
and I'm talking, you know, at their house.
Yes.
Granted, they go to libraries and there's internet at the schools, but I'm just curious on how many households are still in the deficit zone?
Yes, I think from the map, and you're talking about Archuleta County or?
The region
counties?
9, the south
Okay.
region.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what the percentage was.
We've got the best data that we can in our broadband roadmap.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want to say it's probably more around 20 or 30% doesn't have connectivity today, right? Because there's models on the current territory. It's over 30.
Is that connectivity to broadband or is that zero connectivity? No shadow connectivity. Gotcha.
You're saying 30% in Madison County?
And that zero connectivity, is that just terrestrial or is that include like Starlink? And
Well, that includes, so far, what we've gather. The only thing that is not included now at this point is Starlink, because there are areas that will sporadic on when we're actually happening.
Sure, yeah.
But once you get outside of the 3 or 4 mile influence zone of the city of Cortez or any of them, it's very minimal. That's because of the terrain. Your wireless just won't get there.
I mean, wireless is as good as your wireless infrastructure, and that's where your towers are at, and your overlap, you know. The signal will go further than what you can carry data on, you know, and give you good connectivity. You can pick up the signal, you know, you can, just like your Wi-Fi here, you can walk out the building and still see the Wi-Fi, but you can't not use it. So, you know, there's the physics around it does not change, whether you have 1 transmitter or 10 transmitters.
While you're still finding by the wireless phone in general too. Yeah, wireless is a great influence. I live 5 miles out of town, I'm on wireless, because you never know when they're gonna be up or not. On any given thing.
Yeah. Well, and that, we'll talk about it here in a little bit, you know, the license by rule, wireless. You know, if you look at license, they prefer fiber, then next is licensed wireless, and then you can do a combination of licensed, unlicensed. Licensed or unlicensed, the only difference between the two that I have seen in my years is you have someone that can mitigate interference on licensed, whereas you don't on the unlicensed. The propagation studies and everything is exactly the same if they're the same frequency. Now, when you do different frequencies, you can get some distance gains or bandwidth gains because of the channel lists that they have available, but the physics are still there. It only transmits and receives so far. And we're talking about devices that are 100 milliwatts in power out.
Yeah, I agree. I think the only thing that licensing, even to the customer, buys you is the propagation is the same. The only thing it buys you is maybe a lesser interference risk. But that's really not answering all the issues.
No, and licensed by rule, the CBRS, the portion that they're talking about, you know, the carriers, the cellular carriers, they purchased a section of that in an auction. Then there's a portion of it that's reserved for naval bases. And then the rest of it, of that 3 gig band is available for anybody to come. It's licensed by rule, which means the equipment will have some type of mitigation if they see interference. That's it. You're not going to be protected in terms of if the railroad starts using CBRS for their waysides and you're out in the rural area, it's going to interfere. And it's just, there's only so many airwaves we can get out there. Any other questions on digital equity or anything before we move on?
One of the things that I think we talked about before the meeting. And Emily will have probably come back and watch this recording too, but it's much for. Just to reiterate that for Patty and Beth, who are here from our CDC, is I think there's a communication effort that you guys have said you can help with that too, as far as like materials that you can distribute to get out to people to say, hey, these resources are available to you through the Colorado Broadband Office, or maybe even some from the federal side, that just to make, like, could you touch on that just a little bit as far as like that communication and marketing material that might be available for each of these communities that may be represented here and their communications folks to get out?
So around ACP, we have a lot of, we have translated and we have it in multiple languages. We're translating the digital equity. I think they're up to 13 different languages now that the information's been translated to. It's really open. We really have to talk to the community and find out what you need, and then we can generate what we can to help out. I wouldn't say that one communications fits all in that, communities, because what you may want or need here is different than what they need on the east side of the state.
Right.
So we have information and we have data that we can send, or information that we can provide that you can distribute out. But I'd rather we get the right folks together and talk through it and see what you do.
I was on some meeting too, and I don't know if you guys have any questions about or Patty, but I was on some meeting where they're talking about, I said, well, we could get it out to the school district, and somebody, I can't remember who it was, and they had a good point. So I'm not worried about the kids. They kind of just were born with these things in their hands. They know how to use at least the what was the other terms that we use, the literacy part, they've got it.
Yeah.
But and as far as the digital equity component, but they were worried about the seniors. And I guess the veterans kind of come into that as far as retired veterans as well, that they don't always have those skills. And so maybe that's one of the ones that really target us as senior centers in the community as far as getting that information out.
Yeah, and talking with Melanie, they are definitely looking at every avenue that they need to address. And the senior citizen, those elderly communities are definitely on the target. So, I mean, you can see whenever we had the slide that showed the targeted audience, I guess you will, they are on there in several different ways, from retirement communities to, health and welfare, things like that. So I would say, again, Melanie probably could give us a much better understanding of what she has available. And they're still developing, so if you need something that we don't have available, they could develop it.
I do have a question from the CDC side and the communication side. Do you have materials that are really set for the layman to understand what you're trying to accomplish? Just being out in the community with these cards to begin with, the question is, well, what does that mean to me? What do I gain from this? And how do I know my ISP is going to cooperate? And am I really going to get faster speeds? Is there anything that you guys have already developed that would help the layman understand what this effort is all about?
We always create content based on our understanding and never think of who the audience is going to be until we're out there, and then we start getting these looks and questions, right? Mm-hmm. I believe we do have an effort going on, but I don't think everything's been translated yet, because it doesn't translate just one for one.
Because I think that would be really valuable in our community. And I think, even if you're not talking to the elderly population, if you're just talking to people that don't understand what is even broadband, how's that different than what I have today? That would be really helpful to us as we're out there communicating. Take this test and help us get more money.
Yes, because when you say broadband to somebody, it depends on where their knowledge base of what that means to them. Internet, broadband, internet, broadband.
Yes.
They're not the same.
Mm-hmm.
Broadband access is just able to get you a signal so that you get to the internet. The internet is a whole different world.
Right. Yeah, any kind of just base level education that we can do. I think once people understand what this effort is a little better, they're going to be a lot more willing to get involved and try to help however they can and support it.
Okay. So like a broadband 101, that's that can cover from very low understanding of broadband to the highest.
Yeah, and just what's the benefit? What's the benefit to me as a homeowner out in the Hatcher area, which right now has the most, some terrible service? What's the benefit? What am I gonna get from this, and what are you guys trying to do would be a great thing. And I know the CDC would be happy to help with that as well, so we can work on that too.
But I think, again, I'm gonna get you a check. with that.
Okay,
I think
great.
We could definitely collaborate together from the state and this local area and make it, it would be more efficient and it would reach people in the right manner that they understand.
That would be great.
Okay. I'll remember that.
That's a great idea, but then on top of that, how do you get the information to these people?
Well, that's where the marketing plan comes into play. I got that. I just don't understand broadband.
We need a state to just do mass mailers.
Yeah, well, you said that, you're gonna have a fair here soon,
Yeah, next week.
next week?
Yeah.
If we could get you some of that information by then, you can have a booth that.
We have a lot of opportunities to do things like that within the community, so we're already working on how are we going to distribute information. I think we just need to take a step back and make sure that the information that we distribute is going to help them understand what the effort is really truly about.
But, and as we develop these programs, it may change, but we need to keep you guys updated out here with what those programs look like and how you access them and when they're gonna roll out, because, it's like, we got CPF and BEAD money, that was announced 2 years ago, or almost 2 years ago now. And we're just now getting the CPF grant open. It takes a long time to get that federal money into the system and start working the projects that you want to do, so a lot can change between the start and the stop, right?
Absolutely.
Anything else? So the next set of slides here, it's going to be an update. There may be some new information, but if you've seen the slide before, bear with me. If you haven't, ask questions, I'm good. And if the whole consensus is we need to pass the slide, I will skip it and go on to the next one. This slide here is just going to give an idea of what the magnitude of what we are trying to accomplish today. So you can see the rural electrification back in 1930. That was probably one of the single that we can think of in this last decade or last century or so that made such an impact on the United States, the American, rural America. That is. When it was passed in 1935, it was $100 million, which is equivalent to $1.8 billion in 2020 dollars. And now we're about to put $4.42 billion in for broadband, and that's not counting the 90 billion that's already been put into broadband over the last 10 years. So this is, they say it's a once in a lifetime funding opportunity. This is the transformational opportunity more than anything. This is going to set the future for our next generations after us. This is how they're going to operate. And it's not going to be the same as what we saw whenever we were growing up. I mean, I can remember if I wanted to know what my neighbors were doing or what the town was doing, I had to ride my bike and go find out what it was, Now they can get news from China just like that. So the world is speeding up, and we can't sit here and let our rural America suffer because the rest of the world is passing by. So that's what this is all about. Why broadband? This is what you were saying. Why broadband? If you go out there and say it's economic development, what does that mean? That doesn't do anything for my house. What does economic development do for my house? But then you start talking about education, distance learning, healthcare, public safety. There's ways to communicate public safety messages. And then, government services. If you follow what the state of Colorado is doing, it's digital government. We're trying to get everything online. That leaves a lot of people offline. Fast and large, right? And I'm going to get on my soapbox here real quick. We say COVID is the reason this came about. This was here since the internet started. This is here since the phone system started. I mean, if you look at phones themselves, the copper lines were subsidized by the government to get them out to rural America where everybody would have a phone in their house. So we've done this many times. We just need to do this one right. And not leave holes and gaps like we had. Of course, we know why we're here. It's an executive order, 99%. And they created the broadband office with that executive order. One thing that came up yesterday in a call, we've been talking about 100 by 20 is the minimum. And that is the minimum acceptable, but that's not the minimum required. The minimum required is 100 symmetrical. They will accept 100 by 20 if it's a high cost area, or if you've got a plan to get to 100 symmetrical. So, you know, whenever we do that, yeah,
You know my question.
yes.
That's the minimum acceptable for a new plan.
Yes,
Then why would 120 be counted as served in the existing addresses?
yeah.
Just a question.
That was the philosophical conversation we were having yesterday. Why is 100 by 20 acceptable if we're really trying to go for 100 by 100? So it's, I think by definitions, soon as you put that minimum definition on there, that's what everybody starts gravitating to. That's the minimum we have to do. We really need to sit there and focus on, we want 100 by 100 symmetrical. That is our target. And for the acre institutions, it's gig symmetrical.
The only way they're ever gonna break that goes if they get out of the telecom mindset, because that's where it all starts. Telecom business is driving it, and they're the ones that have always done this way, and so they get driven to that. I think we have to break free of that mindset, because it's not telecom.
Yes.
And a commentary on the, you know, and what Jimmy's saying too is same thing, is that telecom mindset. I think the way we get out of that is bring a truly scalable technology to the houses, because then if it's properly configured, speed actually becomes immaterial. It is what it needs to be at that point. And nobody, at a certain point, if we get enough of a mass and you know, a collection of the individuals in Colorado that have fiber to the home, and it's adequately managed by the ISPs that are providing those, they aren't going to know their speeds. They're not going to tell you anymore. And right now we're fixated on it because that is how we're able to participate, whether we have that adequate speed or not. But once you have fiber, it shouldn't even be an issue. It's like, well, it's like, I don't know what it is. I go to this application and it works, you
This
know.
application uses 25 megabits, this application uses a gigabit. This.
Well, and that's all really technical information that nobody used to worry about. Like, think about your telephone. You just worried about was there dial tone and could I talk to the person, hear the person? That was the application for the old telephone. It rang, I answered, we talked. And that's really what the internet is times a million, because there's a million different applications.
See what you're saying? I had to remember which ring was ours, because we had a party line.
You're right.
Yes. That was a good way of finding out what the neighbor was doing, is pick up the line. But you always pick it up, you hear somebody talking, and you just try to hang up real quiet, right?
Depends on what you're talking about.
Yes.
So that's my subtle, you know, plug to say, if we're replacing these speed-based technologies, which counts DSL, fixed wireless, cellular data, satellite, any of those are really more the speed-based old ones with what should be a non-based scalable technology like fiber, that should still be in these applications. It's obviously stated as a preference, and so it should be reflected in the application itself as far as the scoring matrices and everything like that too.
You know, we get plans. I've got a plan from Extended that's 1 gig.
Hmm.
I don't use 1 gig. I think the only time I've ever seen it used over 200 meg is whenever I'm doing a speed test.
Yeah.
That's the only time.
Well, I tell everybody right now, if they get fiber, I say, sign up for the lowest speed that's available because it's the lowest cost. And then if you need more, just go up the tiers, because yes, sorry, Casey, the ISPs will like you to sign up for the higher one, but they know you're not going to use it. That's why they're willing to give you a gig, and they're like, what are they going to do? You know, so you're not going to use it.
Cost us any extra. I mean, we
Right.
we feel like we've been working on it for a long time.
Right.
Like, the only reason we sell it that way is because that's how people buy in.
I know.
Well, like, if we could just give everyone a gig and then we could sell based on pairing or something like that, like you
Yeah.
stream more, great, like, here's an add-on package to your gig that essentially gives you like direct access or direct plug-in to streaming services.
Yeah.
But that's how people buy internet, so there's an education barrier that has to be overcome, but no one's gonna be able to overcome that until we get off of like, again, we get to the majority of people having symmetrical internet. Because right now, people still compare us to cable and CenturyLink or DSL,
Right?
and they don't really understand like the upload or download difference. Like when everyone has a gig symmetrical or has an ability to have a gig symmetrical, then it doesn't matter.
Mhm.
Right now, it does matter, not to us, the provider, not really to the community, but to provide, it's.
The
it matters for
customer
some reason to
comparative,
consumers, because
yeah,
They don't
yeah.
fully understand.
Well, and to Jim's point, from the early sixties, it was, you want a 9.6 analog modem. I want a 19.2. Now I want a digital, I want a clear channel. T1, DS3, you know, we just taking that speed forward, so it carried over into the internet access. You know, I think, back in 2004, when I was working at Quest, we started rolling out Ethernet. Instead of T1s, we rolled out Ethernet drops. You know, we would just put a speed on it. Why not just say Ethernet and you have the speed that you were able to communicate? Because the computers probably can't do a gig yet. Very few anyway, you know, and they're high powered computers.
Well, the people who buy gig packages from a provider perspective, people who buy gig packages want to run speed tests all day. They buy it so they can run their speed test and say, I get a gig, and
Yeah.
they can show their friend.
Yep.
We always charge extra for the gig because every single one of those customers calls in every day and going, I'm only getting 999 megs, like what's happening on my internet?
And 999.
Well, yeah, there's not an easy way to fix it until,
It's education.
well, yeah, until you get it out there and people start understanding like, it doesn't really matter.
What
Like,
does it actually mean?
Yeah.
You know,
and then from there, like, you know, we're all deploying XGS at this point, like, you know, Eric, to your point, I would bet you 90% or more of the applications that get turned in for CPF. At this point, BDD is in that bucket as well, our fiber comp. Like, it didn't used to be that big. Back in 2016 when we started, everything was, you know, wireless or it was like even cable plant, but everyone's adopted. If you're gonna go apply for funding, like, let's do it the right way. So that's helpful. Take the point you're trying to make is, but all those providers are still having to overcome, okay, but wireless is saying that it's 100 by 20. Half the people are in this forest area, they can't even see the wireless tower, so they don't have access to that, but there's no correct way to report that. We know that the data is wrong, but we still are using it as a methodology to deny grants or to say this area is not eligible, which then makes it tough for a provider and a community to get it into the area that maybe the community deems is really the most important or really the best, you know, way for a provider. It's not helpful for a provider to just come into Pagosa, for example, build up the lowest density area because that's where they can get funding, and then that's the only area to build out. Then they don't have enough really economic backing for local support structures, staffing, you know, all the things that you would want in order to maintain and run that network super well and to make future investments into it. And so really, like, we need to find a way for providers to come in, get the right amount of funding, and then have the available funding to go into the other outlying areas as well.
Agreed.
Yeah. You know, it's the mapping, like you said, with the wireless, if you have a frequency that you registered, they do a propagation basically. And it's a theoretical propagation. It's not a realistic propagation because it doesn't take into account what buildings and trees and.
Right.
foliage
in line
and
with
weather and snow.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's. You know, when we get to this point, when we have, then we'll be able to tell what each house has, and then we can maybe get away from this. What speed do you have, or what speed do you want?
Right.
You know, wireless for someone that doesn't have internet today, it's going to be absolutely amazing for them. Until the next big program for healthcare comes out, where the doctor can scan you remotely. Then, you know, it may not be enough bandwidth then.
Well, it's a good stopgap, right? Like, that's how we look at wireless. It's like, I can get wireless up today and I can get it into the community. We might be able to provide pretty decent wireless.
Yeah.
But we never want to use wireless as like, okay, the final solution. It's more like, hey, this is a great way to establish in the community, get customers, and then use it as a leverage point to go build fiber and hybrid. Yeah, area. Well, not even hybrid, like, I mean,
when I say hybrid,
start with
I have my plan was always in mind of the time, was to build out fiber as far as I could. Put towers in strategically, get some wires built in some of those areas, have nothing, and then as it starts to build out, you just basically move them towers and keep building out your fiber till eventually you replace it. And that's really what I mean by hybrid, it's like.
We're filling the gap, like for the ones that are the hardest to get, because otherwise they'll be there for a decade waiting for fiber. At least they can get something, and hopefully the technology kind of keeps pace to make sure it's reasonably good.
yeah.
And Starlink kind of falls into that category too, and we're actually glad to have it, but you know.
Yeah, we like Starlink. I say for most providers, like when they're looking at an area, it's like those guys should be Starlink customers. I mean,
Yeah.
They're so far out there and fiber's so expensive to build, like.
Exactly.
We should focus on the areas where you can reasonably get fiber to, even with grant funds.
Yep.
And subsidy, but there are certain areas that should have Starlink.
Yeah, there's gonna be areas that's still in service. You're gonna get.
Right.
But I'm really excited about, and you guys probably can't tell I'm excited, I'm not jumping up and down. The fact that these grants are coming to the states and local levels to administer where the funds go instead of the federal level, it makes more sense. Because now we can talk to the communities and, you know, develop a plan for the state as opposed to, you know, you're just getting what you get, you know, and I mean, did you guys see the middle mile grant? We did receive one, but that's it.
That's it.
That is it. And it was because they had match. How was that? We gotta get past that. Now we gotta figure out how we're going to fund these great projects like Region 9 had with the funds that we have, or future funds that we think we're gonna, you know, we don't know how we're gonna do it yet, but we've got funds to try. We gotta figure out those programs, or those projects that make sense. You know,
You nailed it, just go out and talk to communities and listen, most of us have already put in most of the groundwork.
Well, I would say give them like measurable ways to dispute the single source of truth that we're kind of using today. Like if the math, right, we've all agreed that the data is not great. And there's not really a better way to do it.
No.
So we all kind of agree to that. It's like kind of, it's the lesser of all evils. But then we don't really set up a super measurable way, I feel like, for a community to step in and say, well, we believe that's wrong too. How do we disprove that? Or, you know, like right now, I think it's, you know, with CPF, it's like you can provide speed tests, but it's an undetermined amount of like speed tests. Like, do we need 20% speed test for the area? Or do we just need like, you know?
I mean, to be accurate, we need to speak that for every location that's connected.
Right.
You know, but.
And that's not realistic, right? Yeah.
But if you look at the programs like the 10%, 50, up to 500, and then after that is 10%. Or, I mean, it's not very much of your network, and it's only a point in time. What happens after that
Right.
affects your bandwidth, you know?
Yeah.
Somebody's downloading a Microsoft, you know, whatever packet, and it's huge, it slows down the network for everybody else because it's congested. I mean, it's just a point in time sliced anyway, and it may be less on that slice that time than it would be normal. So it's as accurate as we can get, I think, but it's definitely a step in the right direction, not doing those zones as opposed to location level.
Yeah.
But there's some pain that came with that. You probably felt it whenever you had your report, the next time you had to report to SEC, you had to change the format, 4 different data submitted to them, right?
I think we were actually always submitting at this level. Because
Okay,
we have everything's RGS across.
okay. I've actually talked to a few ISPs that
No, for sure.
it came so quick, they were not prepared for it. They had to scramble to get information, so they over-reported and had to report a second time to clean it up. So,
Well, there's ways to dispute that through FCC, so I think, I don't know, we just, like, to the extent that there's resources available for communities or direction available for communities to come in and say, well, we know that this area is not served. We feel like there's a huge priority here to get this area to an unserved status. You know, what's the resource those guys can go to, you know, even at the state to say like,
so
who do we go through to get this challenge?
Yeah, we talked about that, didn't we? Like last week, as far as, you know, the possibility of you guys providing the counties with potentially some of the data that we could use, because if you put it on individuals, like we discussed, and I think you were the one that told us, Michael, could you share that? Like how many that you guys got that, you know, were actually individually challenged across the state? It was
Yeah,
it was almost surprising even to me, and I didn't have high expectations.
it wasn't even 1,000.
Yeah,
There's like 300 or 400 individuals.
in the entire
submitting
state.
a challenge to the FCC.
But that's like individuals
Yeah.
submitting a challenge on their behalf, right? Like
Yes.
they're paying attention to broadband, so
Yes.
they're going and submitting that. You say 477 a report to like, you know, half of Archuleta County and
Yeah.
99% of people aren't gonna understand what that
Yes.
means. Is that the best methodology? Is, you know, I think like communities should kind of decide on like, hey, this is the right way to get a community or to challenge the mapping and get it a little bit correct. And if that's the way, then we should dump some education and resources into, hey, if a community's struggling with broadband, your first step to attract providers should be going in and helping the state clean up the data that's there. And here's the process to do that. Here's a resource out of the state or something like that that can help us start challenging.
It's a great suggestion.
Take that on.
Yeah.
Right,
That is in,
let us be the
that's
reason.
one of the volumes in our feed plan, is the challenge process. We're gonna have 2 challenges, one before it opens and then one after grants are awarded. There'll be a challenge process. And that challenge process is to the state, and it's only ISPs, communities, government offices, anchor institutions, no, not anchor institutions. So it's gonna be not an individual,
Yeah.
resident, it's gonna be a community that can say, this whole area is not right.
Right.
You know, and you guys will probably be able to go out there and have a subset do their test and be able to prove. They sell a plan at 100 by 20, but what they actually get is 40 by 5. You know, I mean, that's a.
Or less, no coverage, right? Because it's like, again, it's a propagation map for wireless. So from the state's perspective and from the FCC's perspective, it shows us underserved. But if it's in a wooded area, no one can see the tower. How do we effectively go show that? And I think like when we're talking to communities, that's something we run across all the time is most of the communities, and actually I think Region 9's got a pretty good grip. Like most of you guys are really on top of like getting involved and understanding what needs to be done. But a lot of the other counties we go talk to are kind of looking to us to go figure that out for them. They're like, well, we just want to fix broadband. And we're kind of hoping you would do that for us. Most of the time we need to like point the community back to the state and say like, well, you got to go challenge. Like, it's hard for us as a provider to go say that area is unserved. State, well, of course you can say that area is unserved. Like you want to apply for a grant there, but the community can go do that. So to the extent that we can point them to someone at the state that can help them with that, that'll be super helpful for us.
We will have that whenever we release the initial plan for public comment. I would highly recommend you seek that section out and make sure we got it right.
Awesome.
Yeah, because we have to have a challenge process, and NTIA put out a guide for what they think the challenge should look like.
Okay.
But we can add to it if we think there's something else that we cannot take away from what the NTIA requires, but we can add to it.
Are you guys in the process of developing that challenge process, or are you kind of done with that?
Well, we're still about probably 2 months away from having the first draft.
Okay, but to the extent that we should maybe go look at that challenge process for the guidelines that the NTA and maybe offer suggestions.
Yes, please. Get prepared, get yourself prepared on what the NTIA is recommending. And then whenever you see the states, if we miss something, because I don't know if you guys saw the PPF guidelines, we said how it's gonna be scored for the location. And then it was scoring for affordability. It's wrong. And the verbiage is wrong, but in the grid it's right. So now we gotta clarify that with a frequently asked question. It starts at 100 in the verbiage, and then the grid is at $75 and going down. So
And the 75, right? The 75 is what's correct.
Yes, yeah, what's in the scoring grid is correct. We just went through that yesterday and made sure we had the verbiage right.
Okay,
So that will be out in our frequently asked question. There's quite a few questions that are answers that are coming out in the frequently asked question, several of them from this region, like the IRU. Does that count? You know, how can we count the IRU? I'm gonna jump ahead here and tell you, if it's an IRU that you have no access to serve anyone, it's just a point to get to the end mile, the last mile project.
It's
So it
minimal.
doesn't count, you don't have to count the 250 feet on each side.
As far as servicing those along that IRU path.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you cannot service them and it's not intended to service them, you can use it and it doesn't count against you.
That's purely on how you define it, I suppose, right?
And it doesn't count for the incidental passes, right?
Yeah, yeah.
That's right.
So to the extent that a provider builds middle mile to service the last mile network. And we're acquiring funding for like 2 or 3 strands or something like that. The provider can come with their own funding and build a 144 to hook up people along the path. But only apply for funding for like 2 strands and not count those as incidentals, you think?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Because, you know, whenever you put fiber in, you're putting in 144 where you're gonna fund 2 strings or not.
It'd be hard.
Well, we are, but we might say, okay, well, from a grant ask perspective, we're gonna put in our grant request. We would like for the state to pay for 12 of those strands instead of 144.
I think that if that's not answered entirely in this one coming out, so we have to do a clarification for that. I don't know if they split fiber.
If they give you a linear percentage, you're really getting your cost of that installation down for 2 out of 144. You know, like, be better off putting in a 24 strand.
They are, I mean, it's a way to play the system a little bit, but
Yeah.
from a perspective of trying to deploy broadband, it's.
Yeah, I understand.
You might, really hurt your application if you then go and include that in incidental passing, where like, okay, but I, as the provider, am willing to go build up that area myself. I don't want to go just build 2 strands because that's the only way I can get the application funded without incidental passings. I'd
Yeah.
rather build this the correct way and then put my own investment into the infrastructure off to hook up underserved people or something like that.
This actually plays into regional components too, because I think one of the ways that we were trying to address that to some extent, it's just too bad we didn't get it with the middle mile. Was that if the government entities build these backbones that can be IRU'd very easily, then you don't have to, like, they're in a strategic place to deliver broadband, and you don't have to worry about how many of those strands got paid for, because that's being funded via a different mechanism. And so it's just there left for you with an endpoint from a tunnel from point A to point B, where hopefully you get access to your bandwidth. So that kind of speaks somewhat to I think our philosophical makeup of what we're, from a regional standpoint, we don't want to build generally, and I think now that, Cortez is also, not being a ISP either, that you guys are involved with that I don't know that there's any governmental entity that wants to be fiber to the home, down to the home and be the ISP. So that may even to some extent CPF, I have one example of that we're exactly doing that we're looking at, just taking a little bit of opportunity to put some conduit and fiber in to give a backbone to an area that we want to do a CPF application to, so that then they don't have to worry about that. They just say, we're gonna lease fiber from you at this endpoint, and however many you put in is kind of immaterial to us. We just want to lease 2 or 4 strands from you on that path, but then we don't have to provide along that IRU, to Michael's point. So
Well, so that's why, like 3 issues with that, 'cause we've done it both ways, but you're right, like, the community could ultimately go pay for that section, like, if the community owns the middle mile, that's kind of the Region 10 model that we rolled out, like, in Montrose communities that people were, starting to do in other areas. One, the community can own the fiber, we as the ISP don't really care. As long as when you're building that fiber, you're putting in high count fiber, so consult with the ISPs. What's happening in the early stages of the Region 10 model, when we were figuring it out, and they're like, here's the 12 count fiber, and we're like, that's great, you built all those, 50 miles or whatever. And we would love to hook up all those people along the way, but you've only got 12 strands and there's no way we can do that now. So build it for last mile, you can always reserve 12 strands of that last mile for middle mile. The second thing is, it's usually better if the provider builds it and owns it, because then we maintain the fiber, the community isn't legally required to maintain that fiber. And then we hire new strands back to the community however much they need, because then they don't have to maintain it, but they still have the open access capability that they need. And then the third issue I feel like we're starting to run into, which you talked about middle mile, is it sounds like Dole is starting to go away, which was really one of the only sources that you could pay for middle mile builds with. We're starting to go to a point where you're having to disguise middle mile into last mile builds if you want to accomplish that. And so.
Or vice versa somehow. Yeah, it's mixed
Right.
in. Yeah.
So then you almost like need to use CPF to also build your middle mile, because like what other funding sources is the community gonna get, or the ISP?
Yeah.
So it needs to be part of the CPF grant then, but if we're gonna get taxed or hurt by incidental passings on that, then that's not good for either of us. So if, ultimately it'd be better if we had some sort of middle mile application that the community could apply for and that the provider could partner with, and you could build it as last mile too, but.
Like the NCIA grant.
But at the state level, yeah. Yeah, can you come up with just like, I don't know, 100 million for that?
You talk to Bernie, see if she doesn't get the governor to sign it.
You want that check or a cashier's check?
So these aren't like, the methodology you're saying is 100% correct, but like, these are problems that we're seeing.
Oh, for long haul, it is
Right.
hard to fund it for the
As we
community.
go down that path, we're kind of in the like, hey, if you want to do that project, CPF is the time we're gonna have to do that project, like, or B, one of those two funding sources is kind of the opportunity to pay for that. Or we develop a middle mile grant because DOLA's going away.
Yes, and DOLA going away is a big issue too, and I don't know if you have any insight on that,
And
but.
there's a misunderstanding about DOLA going away. They're just not gonna reserve specific funds for broadband.
Yeah, we consider that going away.
We can still submit other funds for DOLA.
Okay.
But then I think the CPO, we're looking at taking on additional, creating additional programs.
Yeah,
That's what I was wondering.
The question
Yeah.
is, why doesn't the CBO just figuring out how to deal with it?
I mean, we're gonna have to figure this out and have an answer for it when the broadband deployment board sunsets. That's due for next fall. We've got to figure out how we want, is the broadband deployment board stay? Or does it fold into CPO and now it's just CPO programs and we create grants and do that? Like you're talking about, all of that is being considered right now. And it's at a definite different level than what we're on there. So I just think that here,
Yeah.
not go.
That's fine, I wanted to point it out because I think like one, as long as we're having a conversation, like everyone's kind of in the realization that, yeah, it's not going away at all, but for all intents and purposes, it's going away.
because now we're competing with parks and bridges
Yes.
and water treatment plants,
Water treatment
everything,
plants.
yeah.
Well, the hope is with all those IIJ water treatment and all of that money there, they won't hit DOLA so hard, so we can still get some broadband out of there.
You would think, but when ARPA came out, right, that was the water and infrastructure too.
Yeah.
And then they changed.
Almost everything we saw went into, they're like, well, we got water. We're like, hey, well,
Everybody does, yeah.
keep talking about how you like broadband, and we'll give you something there too.
Yeah, we're still running neck and neck, broadband or water, which one is required at the house, right?
Which water is important too, but it's like, sometimes it's upgrade projects or something like that. It's like,
Well,
oh,
it's funny, all my years in telecom, the telecom was the last thing thought of in that building, when they were building a new building. But they had toilet paper, they had water, they had coffee, and then they're like, where's our phones? Well, you haven't ordered them yet. We're turning up tomorrow. Yeah, we're not turning up tomorrow.
Developers are building all these homes and then they build it and they go, oh, we forgot to call some telecom, like CenturyLink came in and ruined their DSL, and we forgot to call the local fiber guys and see if they're willing to put it.
Yeah,
Well, back in the day, US West or whatever. In Durango, if you look, clear out Raptor J, and you're coming to build a house, they promise you service and they give the line like.
Yes.
There's a lot of lawsuits for that, people were relocating, figuring they could work from home, and there was no way.
We, my wife and I both worked for NCI and we were divisional. We used to have a different name for this one. It's called US Work. We did not get a circuit to terminate anywhere because we didn't have the capacity. We needed circuits out in rural areas. And the longest local loop I did was in Idaho, it was 162 miles long. And I tried to put a T1 on it.
just so the people that are on Zoom call, if you, raise your hand, I put a little chime on there. If, I know we're doing it pretty interactively right now, so if you want to join in, feel free. And we'll recognize you, or you can put a question in a chat and I'll repeat it if you don't want to speak out loud.
This is the 4 goals of the broadband roadmap, just a reiteration so that everybody knew and is familiar with what our goal is to reach 99%, what we believe those cornerstones are to get to 99%. You can see expand digital inclusion and adoption. That's big. Affordability is big in the state of Colorado. I think if we track what the ACP has done so far, we've got a little over 200,000 signed up. But that's out of 790 households, 790,000 households that are eligible in the state of Colorado. So we still got a long way to go. We're only at 27%. And the money is due to expire in 2024. And when I say expire, it's going to be exhausted by that time with all the folks that have started up. So, you know, I'm really worried about the ACP program getting refunded. If it doesn't get refunded, it's going to lose some folks stranded. And, you know, that's not the goal of this broadband push.
And with this push for 2027, it's almost becoming unrealistic now. I mean, we don't get to move on really quick. There's no way it is gonna happen.
If the money would have been available the day they announced it, 2027 probably was.
That's right.
But I was in the railroad, PTC came about, I don't know if y'all are familiar with that, positive train control, because of the major accident out in California where the UP train hit the commuter train. Or commuter train hit the UP train and derailed, killed all those folks.
Yeah.
They had PTC, positive train control, came out from Congress. It had to be self-funded by the railroads and had to be done by 2015, 5 years. 2020 was when we finished it finally. I mean, they had good intentions, they want to get the money out there, but you gotta give time for it to you know, happen. And all the time, the J projects, we're gonna be struggling to get enough workforce to do all of it.
Well, and I would say too, like, one thing we're running into is, we're getting plenty of money, and a lot of the providers are getting plenty of money. Even if we get this money in time, more of the issues we're running into is timelines or restraints with like other entities. Like, it takes 2 years to get a Forest Service to agree to, you know, build on their land. Even though it's a right of way identified by Forest Service, just to get them to like think about processing the permit, they're like, well, we don't, you know, maybe that's great, that you got a lot of money and you can hire a permanent person, but we can't, we didn't get that money. CDOT, you know,
Well, yeah, see, guys.
right,
Well,
water users going across ditches.
talking with the
Railroads.
Forest Service for this region, they are ramping up, they received funding for headcount to hire folks to do permitting. So at least they're listening and they're, you know, answering some of the call. But the NEPA, CHIPA, all of that requirement, you know, it's still there. It's federal lands, we have to do that.
Yeah,
That can't be amended because it was touched 10 years ago. That right of way was created 20 years ago. What's happened in the last 20 years instead of going back, you know, to do a full study?
The whole needs a study on an area that's already built.
Been disturbed, yeah. And I think that's some of the language that I've seen in some of the not rules, but the new laws that they're trying to pass is to streamline that and say, if it's on national forest and you're using an existing right of way, what do you have to provide? If there's new endangered species, or if there's something like that, if you're not doing anything outside of that, it's already been disturbed. They've already went through all that program, you know? So we're hoping that we're gonna see some progress there, but it's not gonna be in time for these projects to start. Because they're just now forming, you know, what they need. So,
well, I mean, I don't know, I mean, to the extent, like, what can we take some of this funding to help those guys out? Like, how do we help them move faster? We've started working with pole owners to basically say, like, we get that you're not really scaled to like review 1,000 pole attachments at a time, but what if we hire that guy?
yeah,
And what if we go hire a contractor? Like, we just got $1 million to go build this project. And we want to move fast because the funding requirements expire really fast. Can we go hire that person and share them between pole providers? Or can we go hire that person and, you know, share it like the ditch company working with, you know, basically like calling those guys up and saying like, what can we do from our end to speed your process up? So to the extent that there's like resources available, I don't know how the state can get involved in there. I know that they're already pushing on, I feel like railroads and CDOT are kind of like the two that have been talked about before. But to the extent that the state can come in and help those guys, or at least provide direction to that, I think that's super helpful to the providers trying to deploy.
we've had some interaction with Senator Higginbotham and Senator Bennett on some language around that. We don't know how far it's went yet. But you know, the timeframes to get back to someone, don't wait until the 180 days and say, oh, we don't have this form from you, then 180 days start now. Let's shorten that time frame. Let's do something to try to make it more efficient and less cumbersome. The railroads, I used to work for BNSF. I reached out to the telecom department and told them, listen, gentlemen, you have enough people to do the crossing permits. Will you allow right of way, lateral or parallels? You know, laterals, if you want to call them that, or they're gonna be bottlenecked. Because BNSF itself, they have a company that does all their permitting, third party.
Yeah.
And they have one person for 4 states. Another person for another 4 states. And they're probably cheaper than UP or any of the others, but they're still time frame.
Which at this point, money's starting to become less of an issue.
Yeah.
It's more timing. It's like, we can hire as many people as we need to try and help, but we need the process to move faster. Locates are the other one. No one can get locates done.
Okay.
Even the cities who are asking us to come to broadband, like, well, we need like, 2 weeks to respond to your locates.
Yeah.
Like, how are we supposed to build?
Utility company I spoke with last Friday, they are hiring and training their own locators. So they can keep up.
Well, that's what we've been doing, but it's
Yeah.
all the other, like CenturyLink and.
And we, on our workforce plan, we show, based on our study, we're gonna, in 2026, we're gonna need 626 or 657 locators. That's how many we're short in 2026, but we're already short now. We're behind the
In our region, there's only one company that will do it for,
and they can charge.
It's USSD, right?
I mean, I'm not talking about USAC, and they won't work for a small operation, so. But there's one that will do it, but they're the only one, and they have just a couple of people, and that's for our region. I mean, several of them that we used to work with that would do it for our small broadband efforts here.
Yeah.
They just both went under, they're gone. I mean, and they were coming from Farmington or New Mexico area. And so, yeah, in this area, there's almost nobody. We had to buy our own locator, and I am not trained to do it. It makes me nervous every time.
Is that something that like future jobs is like working on? It's like for someone's like talking to those guys and saying, all these broadband providers are gonna be calling you in about 2 months and saying you need like 16 people out. I mean, is that something they're focused and trying to help with, or?
I'm working with CDLE,
Okay,
Office of Future Work. We did the workforce plan draft. Were you on the call when I reviewed it and
I
filled it
don't
out?
think so, no.
Okay, give me your card, I will make sure I have your contact information, I'll send you. We have a plan, a draft plan together that will hopefully address all of these needs as far as getting training and apprenticeship program up and now. Start training those individuals, because, the funding that we're trying to approve now to have the project won't be available until probably spring. You gotta go through the contracting and everything, then you've got to order material once you get the grant and get contract time. So we're hopeful that we'll at least have some pilots done by that time. But we definitely have a gap. If you look at the future of work and I'm gonna say it wrong, we owe a report. That's the state workforce development plan. They identify construction, computer programmers, nurses, teachers. They identify those top jobs as the most needed. They didn't call out telecom because they didn't know. When they wrote the report 2 years ago, because it's got to be updated every 2 years, we didn't have this broadband flux, right? So now what we're doing is we're going to write the plan for B because it's required, but we're writing it in conjunction with CDLE so that it goes into the normal workforce structure and becomes a call out in our state.
Okay.
For broadband.
Well, that's helpful, because we're running into that issue with our own private investment. I feel like, all this stuff talking about like the money coming down and how it's gonna work and stuff, I think most of us are paying attention to that, because like we're all applying for the grant, so it's helpful, but we're all concerned, like, once we get the money, how are we supposed
How are you
to
gonna
roll it out with all those
Yeah.
different hurdles we're starting to find just with our own private investment.
Well, and I was listening to a webinar, or I think, yeah, it was a webinar. They gave the example back in 2009, whenever the first broadband flux came, it was $9 billion over 2 years. They said labor went up 40% overnight. And that's what their concern is gonna happen this time, whenever they have in these programs, minimum wage, it's got to be prevailing wage or Davis Bacon wage. You're gonna see all these companies that have resources, they're gonna start doubling their bids because they can, there's just enough work for them to do that.
Yeah, that throws everybody's schedule off as far as their budget, yeah.
And you don't want to have someone just starting up a company and take the risk that they do it right for you. You want someone that knows what they're doing. So, it's the workforce plan, it's more important than I thought it was, that's for sure.
Well, I think it's starting to become like a main concern for like us as a provider.
Yeah.
Because I think we've gotten comfortable enough with the grant processes, working with the state, understanding how that works. Communities are starting to figure out and get really involved on like, how do we partner with providers, identify the right areas, reduce permitting, timelines and costs and stuff like that, be a partner in the project. So like those things are getting figured out, but then we're starting to like the thresholds we're hitting, restrictions we're hitting are definitely around workforce and other people that we're having to rely on, other utilities playing along and recognizing that they have a part in it too.
The Office of Future Work, they are now approved by the Department of Labor to do approved apprenticeships. So they can evaluate and approve apprenticeship, and then it becomes approved at the national level as well. There's gonna be a lot of programs started over the next 18 months. And for companies like yourself, we need to get you tied into that Workforce Development Council and get on that bandwagon, if you will.
Yeah.
It's not a bandwagon, but get on that
For sure.
to be registered and to tell, hey, I need this many people, and we can get a pipeline going. And hopefully the training that we're providing, or that we're saying we're gonna provide, but the content of it provides you somebody that comes out of that training ready to go, not you have to train them for 6 more months.
Well, the colleges are on board too. I mean, they're ready to start up those programs, but they need like direction from either us or something else. So.
We're working with several of the, like the community college system.
Yeah.
We're working with CSU Extension. I haven't had any contact with Boulder yet, but the university system here in Colorado is very interested in participating in that.
Anything with Mesa?
Mesa, is that a community or is that a state?
Right.
Smaller state, yeah.
Are
Third
they
junction.
part of the CSUs?
No.
No,
Yeah.
Okay,
Colorado makes.
I haven't heard of any.
Yeah, you might look at it in this area, that's kind of a dominant college system. It's still state funded, but like Fort Lewis and Adams State and CMU and Western. That's where, in this Western quadrant, that's really, even more than the community college. There's Colorado Mountain College in the central part.
Okay.
But and I know you guys got Pueblo, at least over in Pez, I think, but we don't even have yet an instance of our community college in Archuleta County. So some of those other smaller state colleges that are not part of CSU or CMU or CU specifically might be useful to reach out to.
Okay. We've included the higher education, Department of Higher Education.
Yeah.
They're part of the Workforce Development Council. Y'all heard of that? Governor created the Workforce Council that is appointed. They appoint industry, they appoint education, they appoint different government agencies to be on that. And they look at it from a state standpoint. And then each individual region can do the training, and each individual workforce office can do the training or do whatever. We're regional in that sense, but we're looking for that overarching, are we going the right direction for the state? Because, it might be a little bit different here than it is north or east or, further north here on the west side. But for the state, are we structured the right way? Are we addressing the right positions that are, they're saying construction can work. Over the next 5 years.
Do we need a break? We had one scheduled. Michael, do you need a break? Okay.
Sorry if
If I take a break, I stop sweating.
We can press on, or people are taking breaks here on locally as they need them. I think that's probably appropriate. Is there other stuff? Obviously this is good, and it will basically probably get to the point where we get to Q&A on the end. We'll not have any because we'll have done it throughout. But you can press on and just whatever you want to cover, and then everybody can jump in with questions as we've been doing.
Everybody's familiar with the CBO office. What resources we have in the CBO office, mapping, the broadband programs group. Community engagement, that's Dahlia. She reached out to set this up. She's a community engagement, specialist. ACP is her, we call her the ACP queen. She knows everything about ACP. And it run a lot of programs to go get folks signed up. And then we just hired another communications person so that we can keep up with all of the updates in our website and everything like that. Everybody's happy about the change in the date for CPF, right?
Everybody's happy about.
Everybody except for probably within CBO, but yeah.
It puts us in a bind. We still have the timeline that we need to get the grants awarded. We need to go through the challenge process and then get contracts signed.
Yeah.
If we don't meet that schedule, we're fearful that we won't get everything committed and spent by 2026. So,
Your deadline is December 2024 to get contracts signed.
yeah, we want to get them signed before the end of the year so that the first quarter of the year, folks can start getting their material, get ready for the fall to start building.
We'll just try to ask us what we need to try.
I know.
We're good for it.
You know, we could do that in this region, but we couldn't do it with every region. That would be unfair. I feel like Eric said, I've been with the CEO for 11 months now. It's a different world being in a community service group like this than it was being at the railroad or at one of the carriers. It's a different world. Everybody's gotta be happy. Everybody's not happy. Nobody's happy.
I think you'll find with this group, Michael, they don't mind if things are unfair as long as they're unfair in their favor.
Yes, very true.
As long as they're unfair. Well said. Yeah. One change that's coming about in the CBO, some of you have heard this already, Mark Caldwell, his last day will be Friday. He's leaving the CBO. So we're gonna miss him. He's given us a lot of good background information, a lot of knowledge. So we'll struggle a little bit till we get him replaced or figure out how to do the same stuff he was doing. It's this Friday.
Yeah, have you put a job rec out yet?
Not until he actually is no longer in a position.
Oh, they don't overlap them.
Yeah.
State.
That's how the state operates. Mapping, it's source of conversations and misinformation and data wasn't filtered correctly. Hence the reason September 22nd is the new date. If there's information in there now that's not correct, we've got to move forward with what we have and just note it in your application that you're challenging us or not challenging it, what a challenge process would be. But you just put in there, write it up that these are not served, even though they show on the map. We have to see that. So the certain filings with the LBR fixed wireless, they're showing up as served now on the map. They're grading the service. But CPF, we are targeting fiber. If it's not a wireline service, it's an eligible underserved location if it has wireless connectivity. I know you want to get eligible unserved, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't think you can.
Yeah. The locations that we were talking about, when I went in and looked at some of those, they show 100 by 50 or 220 by 50 on the LBR fixed wireless.
220 by 50, who's doing that? Maybe you could show me a couple of those, because that doesn't even make sense.
Yeah.
Well, that'd be coming straight from SEC, so you should just be able to go click on one of those addresses and see.
I'd have to know what the address is, see it, but I'd have to, there's nobody doing that level of fixed wireless that I know of.
I've actually pulled a few of them up around and whenever that's last update from SEC,
Yeah,
a lot of addresses changed. Yeah, somebody put a fixed wireless transmitter up, now they cover the whole area with fixed wireless at 320.
well, and that's where dependency, no offense again, Casey, on ISPs to be the source of this information, you're never gonna get it right. You're never gonna get it right.
That's because we report all of
Yeah, well, you're perfect, yes, I forgot about that, but you're never gonna get it right at the FCC or the state level if they're the primary respondents, because they have their own interest. And then I've even heard one say recently, it's like, well, you gotta understand, there's playing offense and there's playing defense. And so they have their own interests involved that are not necessarily to the same as what the CBOs are, to proliferate the best possible broadband to as many people as possible. Sometimes they're trying to keep people out of a service territory, and I've heard
So there's no competition.
I've heard a gentleman there tell that at the Crested Butte, to Phil Weiser, and he's actually my parents' fixed wireless provider in a different area of the state. And he said, you know, Mr. AG, you don't need to put any money out there, we've got it covered. And he's just trying to protect his investment, because I can tell you, I go up there, and when I go up there to go work, it's down every time, and it's down for, days or weeks at a time, every time the wind blows. And so it's a problem, and if the object is to really get this out to as many households as possible and accurately reflect that they really have what they now we think they should have, and look at the ones that are truly unserved or underserved or any of those criteria, then relying on the ISPs at some point is got to change. I mean, it just has to, because it's not going to be accurate, and you're going to say, hey, we're good. And I don't know if you still have some of these charts up here, but and I know that Megan and everybody else does a great, they do with what they can with what they have.
Right.
And I want to never be critical of them for saying, hey, you can just take the data you have. But every time, I remember this when it came up a little over a year ago, we had a broadband summit that was hosted over in Cortez that the CDC put on, and then the city of Cortez hosted. And, what a lot of times gets thrown up there, and you still might have them, is that, at 25.3, we're, 85% covered by Colorado by the metrics that are proliferated.
Right.
And then even if you go to, or maybe it's higher than that, it's a 90 something, percent now. And those of us that live in Western Colorado, we just know that's not true. We inherently know. We don't almost need the speed test to know, because we know what we get, we know what our neighbors get. It's probably overstated by 30 to 40% easily.
Well, if you look at the mapping and summarize it for the state,
Mhm.
where's your heavy population? I-25 corridor, where there's a lot of infrastructure and a lot of connectivity. That big percentage of the population makes everything else look like it's up there in the high 90s or mid 90s, and it's not.
Well, and even those, I feel bad somewhat. I mean, they've gotten the advantage of more funding over time but there's still infills and within the urban or semi-urban areas that I'm sure are really getting left out in the cold, because this is very much probably validly focused on rural development, because we're the ones that have never made economic sense for the ISPs to put it out themselves. But there are places that across the street, you can get gig, but they may be stuck with really bad DSL. And so across the state, it's still very much a problem, even in the urban areas, although they do weight the scales significantly for what it looks like, Colorado's speed tests are going. And that's where I think that Ookla, it's not perfect either, because it's got all sorts of other issues, but some sort of ground truthing on that really takes that into high M labs and all those others to say, okay, well, what's the reality? And then what we're trying to do with our speed tests, I think maybe taking an amalgam of that, and then even being able to, apply, I don't want to say common sense because it's hard, but all available data to say, okay, how are we really doing in these areas? Because at some point, your data is going to say, yeah, we're good. We don't need to do any more broadband. And there's going to be still 30 to 40% of the state's actual residences that say, oh, I'm not good, so.
No, I hear you. It's not an easy fix, that's for sure.
But I think that has to come from the state. I'm at the point where it's like, there's no way the state's gonna get better information. Like, it's gonna have to be down at the community level. And so you do collecting speed tests, so that you can provide that to providers who want to challenge it. I think one thing the state can maybe just focus on or improve is what is a really well-defined challenge process that is accessible, and easy to follow for communities. We've kind of done that. I know we enacted some stuff through BDB, where it's a community can come, but it started as a good idea, and then I think where it ended up is really inaccessible to most local governments, and even if they're partnered with a provider. It's a lot of speed test data, to the extent there's no way, even if you're doing door knocking, getting out there, trying to, both community and ISP are doing that. I just don't see it as super achievable, so.
Well, it's resources, to your point. I mean, at the county level, I have, I think Sam has an assistant now, but we have one GIS dedicated person in the county. They're doing assessor data, and that's taking all their time right now, if you know what's going on with assessment in Colorado, so they're not even looking at broadband. And then, so how can we take the data that you're using, which is address data, maybe that's filtered down from the SEC, from CostQuest, those locations versus the locations that we do a speed test on and map those, so they look like they're the same place. I'm not a GIS person. I don't know how to do that. So that becomes, those resources themselves are kind of daunting, even for one of the county that has a GIS person, which we do. But I need to get his time and I may not get that. So how do we do all that?
I would say actually the provider can provide that, like we have a GIS team and
Yeah.
we know how to do that and we're very good, because that's what we do all day long.
Well, and that's if you're working with our interests. Sometimes we can't trust that the provider is going to do that in every place.
But for the
Yeah.
most part, we can come in and say, if you
Yeah.
provide us the data, we'll help you manipulate it and right. I would say that what I would want as a provider is like, we're gonna go invest our team into helping the community do that, which we're fine doing. Is like, what is the threshold we have to cross to where we know that we can overturn that? Right now, it's undefined, like even CPF is like, you can turn the speed test results, will it help? Maybe,
Maybe, we
yeah,
don't
we don't
know.
know.
I
So
mean,
it's like, could we define that?
we did speed challenges and, you know, it was very low amount compared to the overall challenges that we submitted. We were more successful on the location challenges than we were on the speed set challenge. And it's, you know, it's a kind of an arbitrary test, because it's just a point in time test.
Right.
It doesn't give you, what is the average over the last 30 days of this person's thing? That's what you should probably use for their speed test, right?
So you're talking about the location challenge is basically an availability challenge, even if it's available, which then the question begs is like, how do you address that for fixed wireless? If it is just a propagation map, which is really honestly the best way the wireless provider can do it. So it's not really on them either. Like, how do we go? We go take a picture at every home where it's like, see this tree's in the way, see this tree's in the way, like.
Well, you know, we're gonna define that, I hope,
Okay,
real well.
I don't have a great answer either, but it's something we should all
I mean,
think.
there's you can, for that address, you can type it into the carrier and see if they provide service in that area. But if they're wireless, they're gonna say, yeah, we provide service, but we're only providing at this speed.
Right.
Well, is that underserved or under, you know, depending on the speed that we get.
Let's go do a LiDAR.
I've seen, yeah, I've seen a few out in the west that I did. On the map, it shows wireless service 50 by 20, for example. And then when you go into the website and you put it in for that same carrier, it says 50 by 20 on SEC map, 3 by 0.2. Okay, that's not fair.
Right.
But they do a whole area. We've got to get away from this area, you know, even with wireless. There's got to be some way that they can go and, when a customer turns up on wireless, the test goes back to the FCC and somehow shows up on the map going, this is what kind of service I was getting today. But what happens when they oversaturate or they oversell that tower?
Yeah.
It's gonna go down.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the old, kind of like voice blocking.
Yeah.
You engineer it for 10% blocking, hoping that you never get there, but that's on Mother's Day and on 9/11, you're gonna get blocked. But any other time, you don't have 90% of your customers going online at the exact same time pulling downtime. It's the same with the internet. Not everybody's on the internet at the exact same time. But there is a given, when there's school need them, most likely everybody's online.
Well, the power companies deal with that too.
Yeah.
I mean, and there's different high demand times, and it's just happens to be a different time than broadband, but they've learned generally to deal with it, except for if you live in California, but you know.
But I think that's gonna change because with all the new apps and everybody working from home and students working from home, I don't see it. I think it's going to be.
Yeah. I mean, that's what COVID shows.
That's what the future's gonna be.
Well, then they sell TVs that are 8K now, and people buy them, and they just go to the maximum available capability, and that drives our bandwidth needs across the network. Even if that's,
That every time I want to watch a movie, I have downgrade it to SD instead of, I don't care if it's four.
You're gonna run into the same problem the other direction, which is why you have to be symmetrical, if all these online businesses, when do you think they do their backups? They do them at night, and usually when they get home or seven, whatever, well, they need quite a bit of heads up to us about it.
Well, let's press on, just make sure we at least cover the, but keep your questions coming, as long as Michael's not overwhelmed by them by now, but.
So you can see the difference in what we were just talking about, the location challenges versus the speed challenge. And that's almost 5 times. Except that's true.
And you guys actually were one of the higher states to actually put forth challenges and get them accepted by the FCC.
Yes.
And that directly correlated to how much money we got for BEAD.
40 million extra.
Okay.
So it definitely paid for itself. This is a snapshot as of June 2023. Just how many units do not have service today. That's 2.7 million units. Now, that's not a house. That's a house, business. That's a multi-tenant location, counts as one location. So this is not household. There's quite a few more households in the state than what this 2.7 units represent.
And that's based off the 100 by 100 or 100 by 20.
This is based off of 120.
So supposedly 91.6% of units in Colorado are served by 120 or better.
Yes.
We must only have, what, 8% of people in Western Slope then, is what it means.
No, you have 6% on the western slope and you have 2% on the East Plains.
Right, in the Eastern Plains, yes. Cannot forget Backer County and Kit Carson, but yeah.
It was funny though, at Eastern Slope, like working with, Vero guys, like we're finding, like Kersey, we were working with the town of Kersey. I just met him at the last state conference. I started talking to him, he's like, we're like a mile outside of Greeley and they only have Century and ESL.
Yes.
I was like, I couldn't believe it. I was like, I guess that makes sense. Like, but what you're saying is true. Like, you just kind of overlook a lot of these populations because this town has 100 by 20, this town has 100 by 20, this town in the middle has 10 by 1, but no one's paying attention.
And that's where the community leaders, the county commissioners and city municipality leaders, them getting the word out and getting that feedback is very important because some of these locations, when you go to a county, one of the county commissioners is saying, we don't need this internet crap. We like the way life is right now. You don't need this internet crap. You're not going to go and fill out for services that you need, and go into the DMV. Why is that going to stop? We'll do it all online.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
What do you lose sleep over when you look at the future?
All of this connectivity, there's bad things that come with it.
Did you say that again?
With all this connectivity, there's a lot of good things, but there are bad things that come. There are bad people out there. All of them. And I'm really worried about those young adults and children and elderly that get on the internet for the first time and they're exposed that someone's going to scam them. Or worse, you get child pornography or child, abductions, things like that, because children, my son, he's 21, but when he was 14 and online playing, we told him, do not ever share that it's raining today, because they'll look at maps. These predators are very well trained on how to get information to figure out where they're at. And that's what I'm doing. And that's where the digital, we don't train and educate even on the safe use of the internet. We're going to expose them folks to really bad things.
Thank you for
I mean, getting the network, we may not get it by 2026 or 2027, but we're going to get the network. It's going to get ready because they're going to make sure. We want everybody to have some type of connectivity. What do they do with that connectivity?
I can do it before I retire.
Huh?
I'd like to see that before I retire.
So you're good 20 years from now?
If I do this for 12 years, I'd like to see it happen.
Yeah.
With the Montezuma County or like everywhere?
Just as long as.
Okay.
I don't.
Based
No
on-
offense, but
Jim, based on inflation and the economy, you got plenty.
Yes.
true.
This hasn't changed since we first put it up when I joined in August. That was a snapshot of how Colorado compares to the rest of the United States. In terms of high-speed internet availability, we were 23rd out of 50. Seventh on high-speed internet adoption. Where it's available, we had 76% of the households in Colorado that had access were using the internet. We were second in terms of devices. That shocks me, because I think that's only those areas that have connectivity, that they have devices. That's the reason we rank so high. And then 20th in terms of affordability plans. And 11th on equity when it came to minority communities. If we're successful with broadband that we've been looking at for the last 2 years, we want all those to be in the top 10. There's no reason they shouldn't be in the top 10 consistently if we do our job. It's gonna be a challenge, but I think we're doing it right.
Barriers, gotta get rid of these barriers that we have.
I will say, I mean, it's cool, Colorado, you know, for all the funding that's funded through Colorado, most of the providers are preferring fiber. And I think in a lot, it's really hard to do wireless in Colorado. So it's neat to see that the infrastructure and the money that we're spending is going towards that future proof solution, whereas like, there's a lot of flatter states out there, a lot easier to deploy a true 100-ish by 20 wireless solution or like some sort of hybrid solution.
Because they have no trees and it's just.
Yeah.
And the view shed is true.
Even in eastern parts of Colorado, it's Midwest.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I think that, you know, for being 23rd and like having to construct fiber internet in the Rocky Mountains, which is extremely expensive and extremely hard.
I don't think that counts the Rocky Mountains. I think that's just all along the I-25 corridor. I think that's the reason we rank so high there, because if you look at some tech centers, all the people that live around those tech centers and around the major metropolitan areas, Colorado Springs, Denver, Castle.
Like, you know, we're in the Montrose and Uray area, like with the 2 grants that we're trying to finish up in the next 2 years for VDD, we'll have 95% coverage of Uray County with fiber to the home,
Okay.
which, I mean, Uray County is like, I feel like one of the hardest communities, it's a mountain community.
And there's diversity in there now, right?
Yeah, we built, OCPH, it's a 40 mile.
Something we need here in Archuleta, which is diversity.
A little bit.
But I would just say that, I mean, I think the money that we're putting in there too, and the money that this is going to, I would bet you the other states, while they may rank higher, are probably technologies that are not as future proof as Colorado's investing today.
I got you. You're saying that probably deploy more wireless.
Yeah, not all are created equal, that's for sure.
When we see that, like, we're looking at projects in Texas for our sister company, and there's like a ton of just, there's 1 billion fixed wireless providers, and then like all these boot grants that Texas just put out, which was some odd $1 billion, it's a bunch of wireless projects, and wireless companies trying to like, you know, okay, we'll go upgrade our wireless equipment. So we see that happening in other states where it's like Colorado is really focused on fiber, which is, I think will help us really in the long run.
Colorado is definitely though behind when it comes to.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yes.
Definitely behind. If you look at some of the middle mile grantees in the Warriors, Kansas State, they might have to state funds to build state open access. Middle mile.
But it's easy to do in Kansas, right? Like, that's why I'm concerned about middle mile in Colorado, is because to get redundancy in the Silverton, you have to build over overpass, or you have to build over Red Mountain Pass, which is, I mean, it's as hard as it gets.
Impossible.
Yeah.
We can't just lay the fiber on the ground and hope that it never.
We talked about it, but
It works for a while. Still doesn't.
More like automakers, I mean, he didn't stop.
Yeah, Automir's didn't have red tape to deal with. So I think about Automir's a lot and how much he got done, but he had a lot less red tape to deal with. Yeah, that's, we've got about, 15 minutes left, till where we were, originally scheduled, and, in the interest of lunch and time, and Michael having to stand up for 2 hours, then, yeah, okay. Let's get on, and then, if there's any, last minute questions, either online, I see we're a little bit dropping off, but, go ahead and get those in, and, while Michael's here, and we'll get on with it.
Just to give you, you guys are probably well aware of this, who's won grants in the state of Colorado. 56 million from the USDA Reconnect, Delta Montrose, Emory, and then San Luis Valley Rural Electric, and then Eastern Slope.
I think Emory is in our area specifically, just for the purposes of the people here. Rick and Jim know, but I believe that's covering Dove Creek and Dolores County predominantly, and maybe some of northern Montezuma County too. Is that covered as well, or is it just Dolores?
It's Dolores County, and then the Skips Farmers Telephone area, and then it comes into Broadband.
And then from the NTIA programs, of course, Colorado tribes really did well. 43.7 for the Southern Ute Indian tribe, and then 22.7 for the Ute Mountain Ute tribe.
I don't believe we have anybody from the Ute, but we do have Jeff here, so yeah, we're well represented on this slide in the for the region.
And those partnerships could only help this area even more. Whenever you start talking about collaboration and good partnerships, it definitely will help. Connecting minority communities, I don't know if everybody knew about this, but Colorado State University at Pueblo received a pilot grant for 2.9 million, and they're doing, it's more of a digital equity navigator. Why does it look different?
Did not catch up.
Yeah, did not catch it. I'm afraid to push a button, I might leave that slide. So it's more around digital equity, so we're seeing a lot of focus there. And then the middle mile grant was in Pueblo as well. And they are looking for, connectivity around Pueblo, and connectivity to housing. But a lot of their houses that they're focused on are already connected, they're just underserved. There's still heavy population in Pueblo that's unserved. So this is what's in progress now. Casey's got a couple of these. Broadband deployment board since 2016, 87.4 million. So we're up to over 100 million in broadband funds so far in Colorado, and we haven't got started with the big grants yet.
And those have been traditionally last mile projects, and is that, I guess, it'll just depend on how if you keep the broadband deployment board around, if it would also start to cover middle mile in addition to the last mile. Okay.
And does the broadband deployment board stay in the form that it is today, where it has a voting board and all of that, or does it become an advisory board that the CEO now has the
Authority.
decision-making authority?
Yeah.
And all of that is being investigated and fleshed out right now.
Okay.
Community Connect grants, I don't see where we received it, but that's still open. It's still funding, they still have one round, I think they're gonna have another round. Technical advisory program, this was a new one that was created, but the application's already closed. So I don't know, I think there was one region that told me they applied for this, and maybe a school that applied for it, one of the universities.
We did.
You did? Okay.
Was that through the USDA though, or the Colorado one? This one, okay.
Now, we have our own technical.
This is through the CSU.
program.
Well, the CSU one was separate too.
CSU received a grant from the state, or was it from the federal government?
From the state.
It was through CSU. I was one of the finalists, so I know a little bit about it, but it was funded by Economic Development. Yeah, Office of Economic Development.
We haven't heard of anybody being awarded anything from the technical assistance program yet, but hopefully we'll hear something from that. Of course, there's the affordability connectivity program. We're at 27% now, a little bit about 27.2% now.
27% of eligible.
Yes. So we have 206,784 that have signed up or enrolled. What I received feedback on last Friday was you can apply the ACP towards wireless, your cell phone, or you can apply it towards internet. You can't apply it towards both.
Hmm.
And people are flip-flopping back and forth, because it's depending on what community engagement they go to and who they talk to. If they sign up for it, it pulls them off of the internet, puts them on the wireless, and then vice versa. So we've got to get that kind of wrangled in to where they're educating what this ACP program is for and what they're assigning it to. Because one of the carriers that was at the roadshow last Friday was telling us about, they see a lot of theirs that sign up, go away, and then come back, go away.
You said this was going funded through the end of
And then
next year.
They had a set amount that was part of the, I believe it was set aside as part of IIJA, but it was just rolled out earlier. And it was 15 billion nationwide. And it's just however long it goes, but right now, last I heard, it was slated to probably run out of money sometime next spring.
based on the current rate of new sign-ups, it was last fall, but I think now with the increase in the sign-up rate, it's going sooner.
Yeah.
So,
The next week.
the new funding, we talked about the ARPA funding, SLRF, recovery funds, that went through the BEV board. Our capital branch funds is open right now until September 22nd. And, you know, we received our BED allotment or amount. Now we have to do our initial plan, our 5-year plan, and our final plan, along with the workforce development plan. We have to submit all those, get them approved. Once we have the first volume of our initial plan approved, we can submit our second volume, and at that point, we can request the 20% to start getting out grants. So we could request 20% of the 826. State digital equity grant, that's what I was talking about earlier with Melanie, we're expecting about 21 billion, that should be next year. And then there's the middle mile grant. We add all these up, we've got over $1.4 billion coming to Colorado just for broadband. It's either already here and being deployed, already spent, or will be here in the next 2 years. And we still need more to connect everything. Whenever we did a LOI, which is letter of intent, we received 86 applications for $5 billion worth of projects. Some of them were overlapping others because they want, you know, they're seeking the same locations or same areas, but still $5 billion. We think we're gonna get far, but if you look at the models that they've run, I think with our funding, if we used all 826 of these, it showed 60% fiber and the rest white. Instead of color. And that would be 100% connectivity. But they're counting all those hay bales, stacks that are filling up as a house and things like that. We don't need connectivity there. CDO grant, let's see, this is just more detail about our CPF. What our goal is with CPF, on our plan, we committed, we were trying to connect over 18,000 unserved locations with CPF. And the tier 1, tier 2, that was a big topic of discussion. And still is. And hopefully there's no questions about that, because we beat that one to death.
No, and if anybody doesn't know, all of the counties represented, I think, on the call today are in tier 1.
Tier 1. I think there was a lot of feedback, and we reevaluated and adjusted and made from 32 counties to 40 counties. So it included another 9 or 10 counties. So it was the right thing to do. When you look at the tier 1, it's intended to get to those rural areas that have no connectivity. That's why there's more funds. Now, that doesn't mean that all 121 would go there. If we don't have that many projects there, it would go to a tier 2 or vice versa. It just depends on what project we have submitted. That's the timeline, nothing changes there, we still plan in December to have all funds obligated and grant contracts done by the end of December, so that, everyone can start their build cycle and ordering, and we're hearing the material is not backlogged that much anymore, because of one of, I think it was Verizon canceled a big fiber project. And millions of feet of fiber are now available, so we're hearing that that's come down to weeks as opposed to months, counting as far as backlog. But there's still a work of course concern.
Isn't that application deadline changed now?
Yes. But I didn't update it here yet. Thanks for catching it. I'll update it now.
It's basically about a month from that day, like what, September 22nd?
22nd. So that changed.
Like with our, the tribe's NTIA submission, we pre-funded engineering, so for this, we don't have that, if we're gonna submit something this round, I mean, what's the guidance, just kind of figure out our footprint and estimated cost to get it done, and that's it?
If you don't have a full-fledged engineering plan, you can put together a high level and submit with that. But I would be worried about the contingency, that you keep putting enough contingency in there for your make ready for cold, if you're gonna use mold, or the increased cost of labor, things like that. We've heard on a couple of occasions that companies they're looking at like 20% contingency on average now, whereas it used to be 10. And some of them are saying they're doing 25 or 30 because they're using that holds and cold. So it's, we definitely want to try to have as much of a solid plan as we can. And, you know, explain it and we'll go through it. Because what we're afraid of, well, not afraid of, what we think is going to happen is we're going to award all this money out. Labor is going to go up more than what we expected. And then the cost of doing everything is going to go up. So it's going to end up creating a wider gap from what was funded and what needs. The fee. So we're in the process of 180 days of submitting our proposal now. We have until December to submit that, but we're hoping to submit our initial plan in September, October timeframe. There's 4 states that have already indicated they're going to submit their initial plan here in the next 30 days. So we don't want to be the last one that submits, but we don't want to be the first either. We want to try to get it right. We're still working. Oh, so we're targeting the first half of next year for the portal. We originally were targeting the first quarter, and we're still targeting the first quarter, but we believe that might split a little bit depending on our plan and what's approved. So we got to get through all those approvals and then we can type that this time out. Broadband readiness, you guys know about this program. Broadband readiness program, I skipped over to another slide. Trying to say, but the broadband readiness program is just it is an effort for the community or a region to go through to check some different things as far as information availability, like feasibility study, that, you know, some due diligence has been done so that an ISP that wants to partner knows that they've got some information already. They don't have to start from scratch and the partnership maybe will be a little bit more robust at that point. And then talking about the workforce development earlier, this is what when we look at our plan and the study that we did, that's where we see the majority of the positions. But if you notice, most of those are construction positions. That's where it starts at. The hope and the plan for the whole reason for our plan is to take those individuals, get them into telecom, into the workforce as far as construction, and then they move on with other curriculum to move into technician positions or maintenance positions, customer service, other positions that we may know once the next. So it's not just a construction one and done and that. There's a plan for that to continue. And the takeaways from that, you know, other than it being mostly labor, high percentage of the workforce that we're going to be short is labor. if you look at the construction industry and the broadband industry side by side in the workforce plan, you'll see that they pattern each other really, really close. In terms of areas in the state, the regional in the state, and as well as the makeup of the workforce. White male versus female, Hispanic, minority groups. It's very, very similar, and what I heard from all of our study was we have a lot of work to do to get the word out to those groups that have never been represented in telecom. Casey might be able to attest to this, but did you go to, come out of high school going, I want to be in telecom? Did you even know what telecom was at that point?
We started when I was an intern in high school.
Okay, so that's the reason you knew, and that's where we need to get with this program. We need to get to the high school level, start educating young minds before they decide that they're not gonna go to college, or they're gonna go to college, or go to the military, because there's other options.
In those first year technical colleges too, because they got a whole bunch of people that are just starting to think about getting into this field.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the guys I worked for me, I got him right out of technical college, he was still in college. I gave him an internship, and he worked for a year for free, and now he's a full-time employee.
Kind of lowered the total cost of ownership, doesn't it? We're targeting apprenticeships, free apprenticeships, you know, at the high school level, doing those paid programs where broadband or telecom is part of that, as opposed to someone falling into telecom by accident. So we're hoping that this will come together and we'll get the right partnerships and all the right parties together and it'll work. It's gonna take the industry, and you guys come into the table, and I'm saying you guys as ISP.
Yeah.
We don't hear much from you. When we're on the call, there's crickets. What do you need? You're not used to the state government coming and saying, how can we help you with employees? You're used to having to find them on your own, right? So we gotta get your trust where you'll share that with us.
Well, let's talk afterwards. I mean, right now we're hiring used car sales guys, people straight out of high school, we're teaching them how to splice and stuff. And the colleges want to help too, but yeah, we do, I guess, right now, we feel like we're kind of doing it on our own.
And
You
that's what our
guys,
programs are gonna be targeted to do is for you. And you can come and say, we'll pick 5 out of this class. And you can go have your pick of the 5 that you're gonna hire. That's what we're hoping for, that you don't have to go and find them. You know? Yes,
So I'm the grant writer here in this county. I've worked with the economic development group, the community development corp. Right now, I'm managing a $280,000 grant for workforce training, and it's a follow-up on our successful last year, which had people in 21 different industries. We're also really focusing, that's mostly high school students, we're also really focusing right now on our 18-24 age. The big thing for me is I have money to pay for their internship, and who do I send them to here in this remote county of 15,000 people to be a part of this broadband workforce?
what types
Other
of
than a
positions?
fun lecture,
What types of positions?
you tell me, I'll fund it.
and see, that's where we need industry also to be a part at the table, because if we have regions like this that have money, why not pay for apprenticeship programs? Colorado Springs Utilities told me that they started their own apprenticeship program for locators, because they can't find them. Now,
We just
before-
ran 7 people through CDL class. Last year.
Reach out to people within this group. and-
Yeah, so what you've got, last year we had 34 interns here in 21 industries, from healthcare to water and sewer to, but we're not even
Yeah.
getting close to this kind of thing, so I would love to know more.
We haven't rolled this, we haven't formulated enough to be able to roll it out yet. If you want to be maybe considered for a pilot or try it. CDLE, from Keegan. Are you familiar with her?
Say that again?
Kathleen Keegan from the CDLE, Office of Future Work. She has workforce plan and she has apprenticeship.
We'll swap cards.
I can get you in touch with her, because there is a lot of effort and money to put into workforce development.
Yeah, they're gonna stick it in.
Well, the biggest thing I learned, like in my own family, My children are third generation higher ed on both sides of the family. I've really learned working here in this county because we have a fantastic career trade education program at our high school. Not everybody needs to go to college.
Right.
Not everybody needs to go right now. Pagosa Community College is bringing more and more opportunities here as we have these funding things. But we're also, like for the CDL class, we hired an independent contractor to teach. And within 1 week, we had 70 CDL tournaments. So.
Yeah.
Let me know how we can help.
But, and there's more grants available through Department of, Labor and Employment.
Yeah.
They have some grant programs, and I think they received additional funding for next year for apprenticeships, starting next year.
You know, another thing we could do is like, I know our can want to do that, they, you know, we're so, probably that, we're looking at them to do stuff. We could put stuff on the walls and they're right there, it says, here's your intern opportunities, here's your available. I know that they do work the workforce there, but I don't know.
We just met with the Southern Indian tribe and we have tribal members 18 to 24 in our select county that are looking for those next opportunities. So we're making a real impact here. We're making it rain. So, that is so much more employable down the road. I think too, that the program of, the former coal miners out of the, Hotchkiss Paonia area and the folks coming out of the Delta Correctional Facility and the non-violent offenders. I mean, these kinds of things are what we are about on the Western Slope.
Yeah, that is, you talk about the correctional facilities and everything out back into the society. That is one of those areas where good source of, reasonable employees. But there's a lot of companies because of their bonding and insurance, they won't take, high, line. So, we've got to work it and do those right. Those guys deserve.
Model. The company out of Montrose is called ClearNet. Yeah. Here we go.
So you guys are hiring.
We're having tons of questions.
No, I mean, you're hiring as a correctional facility, attorney, that kind of thing.
We could be, I'm not sure, hiring about 10 to 15 people a month.
You haven't had. It's a lot.
Okay, thank you.
Repurposing, retraining, people. So here too is also. We're having whole power plants. And the Americans can attend for those college tuition free.
Correct.
So they're making a big push there to, reskill people into, renewable energy and as well as fiber.
There are so many industries that have a subset of cross functional, or you could take that into another industry and start picking up to go in different directions you want to. And we just need those programs identified to do it how they can, like a pathway. And I know this is gonna take me, but I used to take those tests in high school where the counselor would say, you fit these categories, you best be fitted for this. And that's where they stop. They never go to me. And to do this, you gotta go do this and this, you gotta go to college for this, or you gotta go to the trade school for that. They never go far enough. So you're left on your own. And what are you gonna go? What you're interested in, or what you hear the biggest hype about, and that's computer programming. How many computer programmers do we need?
Well, with AI now,
Yeah, AI.
and then the thing about these jobs you're talking about, AI can't help with them. They're all very, they're on the ground, they're physical. You can't replace them with outsourcing from another country, nor can AI solve it all. It can be a tool, but that's all it can be.
And that's what's, when the workforce or the represented workforce, the union workforce, when they hear AI, they immediately start saying, not our job, not our job. AI is just gonna be a tool for us to be able to pick up and do more with the same amount of facilities or same amount of employees that we have now, or increase, because the AI's gotta be watched.
Okay.
It's not a perfect.
Well, just like our laptops and the internet became, that's when they became, ubiquitous as well.
Yeah.
Is there any other, I think you're pretty close to, you're at the next steps, which I think is the last thing on the agenda. I don't know if there's any slides that go with it, or is it just more of a comment? Oh, there it is.
how we can interact together with the CEO, the residents, community leaders, and internet service providers. You know, reach out to us. We'll give you any time you need to try to make sure that we have the right plans and the right programs, projects identified. Because we don't have enough funding to go for everything. We need to pick those that are gonna make the biggest impact and give us the most reachability that we have.
Keep doing what we're doing. Hey, Michael?
Yeah.
Just a question, so like within TIA, the tribe was pretty confident with the tribal broadband connectivity that we were gonna get something to recoup our engineering costs. I mean, could be, you know, is it a similar thing where we have high level engineering, or should we spend the money proactively for detail engineering and have all of our I's dotted? The only problem with that is it's a more of a competitive opportunity than the tribal broadband connectivity, so it's hard to convince the tribal council to spend money when we don't know if we're gonna win the award or not.
Right. No, I get you.
Kind of get your thoughts on that.
Well, definitely the more flesh that your engineering plan or your engineering is, the better application you're gonna be able to articulate. Because you know where you're gonna be, you don't have to have all those contingencies or what ifs built into it to inflate it. So it will be recoupable in terms of money spent if you are awarded. If you're not awarded, of course, it's money spent that you can't get back. So, you know, it is a fine line that you have to walk. And I don't know what type of fund, I mean, how much of it getting charged for your types of, you know, your studies, things like that. 'Cause we've heard from 15 to 20 up to hundreds of thousands for something to get their plans. So it's like, you're only talking about 1,500 households. How do you cost that much? Yes.
You happen to know where the NTIA is at, as far as their letter of credit requirement?
No. There's been a lot of activity and a lot of outreach from Congress, Senate, everyone. Nothing has changed yet, nothing has moved.
So as of right now, that would be a requirement.
Yes. Which impacts the local municipalities and government offices here in Colorado based on statute and the Constitution, right?
Yep.
Yeah. It's a definite subject on every call that I've listened to across different states. They're all saying that this is, they have to address this somehow.
Well, it's set up better as far as the governments, local communities and stuff goes. It's set up with better unless you're a big corporation with huge pockets.
Yeah, if you look at the rules and the NOFO, the guidance, it says we want to promote the use of those companies that have not normally been included in telecom bills, the smaller businesses, the minority-owned businesses. We want the communities and municipalities to get into this and have open access. But then when you look at all the requirements and boil it all the way down, it looks very heavily geared to what we big ends. Again.
Exactly where you're at.
So we're gonna have our hands full trying to figure it all out. And then the real fun begins after the money's done.
Yeah.
I'll probably have a travel trailer parked somewhere around here, so I can go look it up. Because that's one of our, it's a reimbursement program.
Yeah.
And since we are doing it as a fixed amount award, some of the compliance reports kind of go away, but they're still, for you to get that stage and get paid, I have to come out, or someone from the CEO has to come out and say, yep, you did, you're good to go to the next stage or next phase or whatever.
Right.
And we only have 2 in our organization that have ever even seen the fighter build.
That's a problem.
The 2 of us are gonna.
Sounds like you guys need to tap into your own workforce.
We're gonna be fighting with Casey for somebody that knows how to look at fiber projects. We'll be fighting him for.
Yeah,
Yeah, I know. And what's that?
we can't find it either, we're just training people at this point.
You're training them and then they move on.
I know the second grader was always.
Oh, nice, stick around,
They stick around.
yeah.
Then you're doing it the right way, because a lot of companies train them and then they complain that they do.
I mean, we've had subcontractors complain about that, like we're seeing a lot of those guys lose people to the,
For 10 cents an hour, you know, they have to go to another.
but.
Especially if it means left track.
Anybody under 40 years of age doesn't really, no offense. Doesn't really get the loyalty thing anymore. 10, 20 cents, more time off, I'm going to the next one.
What companies are loyal to their employees? It's the smaller companies that are going to smaller. You go to the big companies and you're another employee ID that gets a check until you don't get one. It's
They're only smaller companies, but they get bought up by bigger companies.
I had this discussion at the railroad with several hiring management people. They made that comment as well, Shaq, that, you know, we just can't find millennials that want to go and travel as much as we need to travel on the railroad. If you're moving every 18 months, you're moving the railroad, moving to a different area, you're management, leadership. And, you know, there's just not a lot of people who want to get that kind of model. And they were like, oh, it's the millennials, it's millennials. I was like, how is it the millennials? What did you want to do when you were 21? Go to work every day or go play? Every one of us that went through this. When you're younger, work and play doesn't have the same priorities as they do when you're older, you know? We grow up, you know? I still want to go play, but
I think it's just the difference in the type of work that's being done. Because when we were younger, obviously, there was no such thing as remote work.
right, you had to go to a job, you had to go to the office, you had to go where the work was, you had to travel.
Yeah.
They don't have that. I mean, with the workforce and the way that work has transformed, they don't have to.
Well, to a certain extent, we are enabling that.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, and we have to realize that we're enabling the shift in that, those demographics and
And
that
that's all it
opportunity.
is. Need to get to that high school level and convince those that want to do that. Here's how you can get into it and do it, and not leave them left out, so that they just find their right. I mean, I got in telecom because of the recession. I'm gonna be an electrical engineer. I saw all the electrical engineers getting laid off in the early 80s, so I was like, I'm not gonna be able. So I started thinking, what is, you know, somewhat accepted for, but everybody has to communicate, whether they travel or not, it's their story. They have to call somebody if they want to work for them. That's how I feel into telecom. Got lucky. Now I've been.
Going to the computer business, but staying away by accident.
Well, it's now 20 after, I want to respect everybody's time, and any other final questions for Michael before, either in room or online before we close it out?
No, and nothing, you guys want to cover any additional?
There's always something.
There's lots of things to complain about.
Well, as long as we can try to figure out a
But
solution.
there's not nothing that you can fix.
Oh, okay.
You can call your commissioners that are in Macon.
Well, I want to thank Michael, for coming down. I appreciate him coming down. And, for the Colorado Broadband Office for providing the opportunity for him too. And yeah, we've definitely enjoyed having this, ongoing, conversation with you, even before this meeting. That's why it's really just seems like it's just part of a continuum rather than like a, you know, oh, it's the first time we've talked to you. This is just, you know, little snippets of conversation that we'll probably carry forward and that we've already had, some history with. So we appreciate you. We appreciate the ongoing, support and your efforts. So thanks for coming down and thanks for everybody for coming.
Thank you.
And yeah, Montezuma County Cortez for such a nice presence.
Yeah, they're representing.
Yeah. And grab snacks for your drive home.
Nice.
Okay. Thanks to Patty and for Dad for setting up.
With that,